Hey, sports fans, PB&Z Sports Chaos. Hey, PB, I got a special shout out to the Fitchburg State University track team. I happened to have gone to the reunion last week for that team. I was a member of them in the early 80s when they set most of their records. Boys, I know you're watching. Shout out to the Fitchburg State track team. You guys are legends. All right. Hey, it's MLB trade deadline weekend. August 2nd, which is Tuesday, is the trade deadline. PB, should the Sox sell out or not?
And I mean, I don't think they got a chance at really getting deep into the playoffs if they can make it. Now we realize the strength of the East, but they've been faulting lately, and their staff's not holding up down the stretch. It's kind of almost reminds me of last year a little bit. And I just don't think they have the horses to take them all the way. Injuries have been playing a role. Obviously, your two top guys, Trevor Story and Rafael Devers, are two of your top three guys, right? 3 or 4 guys are been out of the lineup for a while now. I just don't think this team's got it in them this year.
So let me ask you a question. JD Martinez, I love the guy, but he's a free agent after the end of this year. He's like 35 already. Nathan Eovaldi is a free agent, and Christian Vasquez, the catcher. They're all free agents at the end of this year. Yeah. So, do you make a move and trade those guys?
I would consider it. I mean, you got to really look at the future of the team. Where's this team going to be the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years when you have other teams in the division, in the league, for that matter, that are better than you right now, right? Lineup wise, pitching staff wise.
I mean, they're like, what, 5 for like 18 and 17, I think it is, in July, right? They've just like a tailspin. Oh my God.
Not only that, but you know, there was a stretch of time when they were being outscored like 60 something to 10, or I mean, whatever it was. They lost 2 games to New York that were like 14-1 and 15-1, and then they went ahead and lost 28-5 to the Jays. And I was just like, I mean, how could you be losing games like that around the All-Star break in July and expect your team to be good, you know?
And by the way, I do not, most teams would put this on the manager. This is not Cora's fault. This is clearly on the GM's fault. And we've been on this guy's butt for 2 years now. Chaim Bloom must go. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, man. Hey, by the way, all right, so moving on from the Sox. Oh, by the way, I have one other question. John Henry, he's obviously bought into the whole thing about Chaim Bloom saving money. Should John Henry go? Should he sell his team? I think he needs to sell a team.
Interesting debate.
We'll talk about that in a future show, but that's another topic. I don't know. One last thing on baseball. Juan Soto. We talked about it last week. He turned down the Nats offer of $450 million. Where does he go? Clearly, the Nats going to trade him right now before he leaves, right?
I mean, here's a guy who's definitely, you know, future face of Major League Baseball potentially. I mean, he's definitely worth a big contract. I don't know if he's going to get up to those kind of numbers, but I don't know where he'll land. I really don't at this time. You'd think a big market team would go after him, like the Mets. Although that's the same division. That's tough, right? The Yankees obviously end up seeming to get players like this. The Sox even sometimes make bids for players like this. So we'll see. Maybe he goes out west to the Dodgers or the Angels or something. That'd be another good match potentially for him.
I got him go. Here it is, PB. You're right about that. I would have thought the Yankees, but they traded for Benintendi the other day. I don't know if they can fit another cog in there. I think they're overloaded at this point in time. The Mets would be a good spot, but I happen to believe it's going to be the Padres. So Juan Soto goes to the Padres August 2nd. That's my bold prediction.
Okay, that's next Tuesday. We'll see.
Hey, by the way, before we get to football, I got a trade rumor, a theory for you. Would you trade Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and 3 number 1s for Kevin Durant?
Not in a million years. Not in a million years. I mean, Jaylen Brown's 25.
Yes.
KD's 33.
4. He's going on 34.
34. Marcus Smart,
28.
but he's a great defensive player, and he makes plays in the playoffs. He makes plays defensively. And then 3-1s on top of that. No way. Not even close.
I mean, the ones in my mind, the ones are not a big deal. If you're a winning team, the ones don't matter because you're going to be in the bottom of the first round, right? So I don't really care.
Yeah, but even without the ones, I wouldn't trade Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown for KD.
By the way, KD is 34 years old. He's played 15 years in the league. 15 years long. 34 is okay age, but 15 years, that starts to tax you. And he's had 2 major injuries in the last 4 years, right?
Yeah, no way. Not a deal.
I'm with you. All right. Hey, last thing I want to talk about before we get to the AFC North. Julio Jones, who I think is the best wide receiver in the NFL since Calvin Johnson, is playing for Tampa Bay next year. What do you think?
I think it's a good move. I think, and it's another Brady recruit. We know he went ahead and recruited Russell Gage. We talked about him last week.
Yeah,
it's a good wide receiver room. Chris Godwin is coming back from injury. Will he get injured again? If he does, now they have that security. You got 4 really good receivers there that Brady will love throwing to.
You think about this. This is the best pure wide receiver since Randy Moss played for him in Foxborough.
Probably.
Right? Yeah, all right. By the way, if you're Kyler Murray, are you upset about the fact you have to do homework?
All I got to say is look at my post on PB&Z on Instagram.
There you go. All right. AFC North. Let's get into it. PB, I know you hate Lamar, but he's about to get one of the best contracts in NFL by holding out and waiting for his turn. Yeah. Let's talk about his team first. The Ravens, AFC North. What's your thoughts on the AFC North and the Ravens?
Once again, I want to start off with a little recap from last year.
Oh, yeah. I forgot. I'm sorry.
I think I'll give you the recap. So last year, we both didn't really do so well in this division, believe it or not.
Who saw the Bengals go to the Super Bowl?
Right. You had the Bengals at 5-12. I was giving them a little bit more credit at 7-10. The over/under was 6.5, so I had them slightly over. Obviously, would have crushed it. They finished 10-7. I mean, they didn't blow away teams. They finished 10-7, but they made a nice run at the end. Cleveland, we both had some high hopes on them. You had them at 11-6, maybe even 12-5. Right. I had them at 10-7, and they finished 8-9. So their under/over was 10. So you would have won if you bet the under on that. I was on a push with them at 10. Baltimore, this was the biggest surprise. I had them finishing 8-9, spot on. That's what they finished, way under the 11. I said bet that all day. You had them at 13-4 or 12-5. That one was a big miss. Pittsburgh, you almost nailed this. You had them at 9-8. I had them at 9. I'm sorry, I had them at 6-11, and they finished 9-7-1. So you were pretty much right there. So big misses on Cincinnati, big misses on Baltimore, big miss on Cleveland. I mean, we really didn't hit well at this division last year. So let's see if we can make a correction for this year.
I would have said though, Baltimore, unfortunately, Lamar missed 4 games, which was 5 games. I'm sorry, that was a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk about Baltimore. By the way, they lost Hollywood Brown. I think that's a huge loss. But they added in the draft Kyle Hamilton as safety, and I believe they had this kid Marcus Williams, another strong safety. So they're beefing it up on defense a little bit. What do you think about their team this year? What are you going to do?
Yeah, I think this team will vie for a playoff spot and maybe even vies for the division this year. With a healthy Lamar for the whole season. My prediction is that they will be 10-6 going into the last game of the year. Cincinnati will be 9-7 going into the last game of the year. Baltimore will play in Cincinnati. If Cincinnati wins that game based on tiebreakers, they're going to win the division at 10-7, even though they'll finish both 10-7. Baltimore will have to win that game on the road in Cincy in order to win the division and potentially even make the playoffs, because 10-7 is obviously on the cusp.
Right.
The reason why I have, and obviously I gave away my Cincinnati record here too as well, but I have them both at 10-7. But here's the reason why I think Baltimore will jump to that record and Cincinnati kind of sits at that record, because they were 10-7 last year. And here's the reason for it. Baltimore plays a last place schedule. They finished in last year at 8-9. That means there's 3 games outside of the regular division and playing the other NFC West opponents that the Cincinnati will play is at the Giants, at Jacksonville, and Denver at home. Those are 3 very winnable games for Baltimore. And meanwhile, Cincinnati has to play at Tennessee. They get at Dallas, and then they get Kansas City at home. So when you take those 3 games, forget about them because all the rest of the opponents are the same.
Yeah.
You take those 3 games, that's a big difference. That's a 2 or 3 game difference, which is why
Yes.
I think Cincinnati is a 2 or 3 game better team than Baltimore. I really do. In a vacuum, I think they would finish 2 games ahead of Cincinnati. But because of that, those 3 swing games, that brings them back to the same record. And that's why I have them both going 10-7.
PB, I'm a little more aggressive than you are. I really think they're going to, I think they all split the division. All 4 teams split the division because I think this is a very close division. But the only other game that I really see them having a challenge with on paper is the Bucs at Tampa Bay. I know they got the Dolphins. I know they got the Bills. I know they got the Broncos all at home.
And the Pats.
Yeah, but Pats are at New England and at New Orleans.
Right.
So my point is, I think at the end of the day, those are the only challenging games for them outside of the Bucs game. So I really think they go 11-6.
Okay, so 1 game better than what I got them at, 10-7.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's talk the Bengals. Last year, a Super Bowl team. I
Yeah.
don't think they really made any significant signings. Do you?
No, they didn't, and that's why I have them going 10-7 again. And they'll have to fight for that because they're playing a first place schedule. Like I said, at
Correct.
Tennessee, KC, and at Dallas, so they have 3 swing games because of because of the first place record. They got back-to-back road games several times throughout the year, and a couple of those to note: at Baltimore, at New Orleans, at Pittsburgh, at Tennessee, at Tampa, at New England. Those 6 games when they have to go back-to-back weeks on the road, they'll be lucky to split those games. I mean, they could very easily go.
I agree.
They could easily go 2-4 in those games.
Yep.
They do have a soft stretch right before their bye with Atlanta, Cleveland, Carolina that'll help them like keep that record going. But that's why I got them 9-7 going into the final game of the year, and then winning at home against Baltimore to win the division at 10-7. But 10-7 to me could be their ceiling this year.
I'm with you. I think. By the way, 10-7 is my ceiling as well. Their basement's 8-9. Don't forget, they have 2 really tough home games outside the division. KC and Buffalo both come in there, and you're talking about 2 of the better teams in the AFC, right?
Right. Yeah, and Casey's going to want some revenge from last year too.
Yeah. So you know what? I think they go 10-7 at the end of the day, and I finish second.
All right, so we're spot on with that one.
All right, let's talk Cleveland. And by the way, the Cleveland predictions all hedge on whether Deshaun plays any games, I think, at the end of the day. Do you agree?
Right. I agree. And by the way, Cincinnati's over under in Vegas is 10. We both have them going 10-7, so it's a push. Baltimore's is 9.5. I got them 10-7. You got them 11-6. So you're saying over on that. Cleveland's off the board. You can't even bet the under over win total with Cleveland in Vegas right now. It's off the board because of that.
Yeah.
So for us to make a prediction is almost kind of tough. We're basing it on defense and maybe, how well Nick Chubb can run the ball and Kareem Hunt and so forth. But I got them at 8-9. That's probably a gracious 8-9. I see their winnable games at Carolina, New York Jets, Pittsburgh, and at Atlanta. They do go through a tough stretch, and that's their first 4 games of the season, by the way. I think they can start 3-1 with that schedule. But then their next 7 games are brutal. They got the Chargers, they got the Patriots, they play at Baltimore, they got Cincinnati, they play at Miami, at Buffalo, back-to-back weeks, and then they got Tampa. If they come out of that 7-game stretch with 2 wins, I'd be surprised. Going 2-5, maybe even 1. So now they only have 4 or 5 wins going into that part of the last part of their schedule. I got them at 8-9. I think 8-9 is what this team can do this year, and that's even if Deshaun comes back, maybe swings of the game one way or the other. But I'm sticking with my 8-9 with them.
So I'm close to you on that. I've got them at 9-8. I think the basement for them is 7-10, maybe 6-11. And to me, the toss-up games are the New England, Washington, and New Orleans games. That's what makes up the difference between the basement and the ceiling for these guys. Obviously, all the games you talked about on the road, I think they lose all of them. You just mentioned at the end of the day. There's no way. With or without Deshaun. Because, by the way, they have no number 2 wide receiver. They still have a pretty decent defense. I know I lost a couple of guys, but they still have a pretty decent defense.
Yeah.
But they have no number 2 wide receiver for Deshaun.
Peoples-Jones is their number 2 guy.
And by the way, that could be you or me. I mean, at the end of the day, 9-8 is the best. 8-9, you're probably right on the money. You're probably better off than I am. So there we are. All right, let's talk about Pittsburgh. Big Ben retired. They got 1 million quarterbacks in the draft room. Kenny Pickett, Mitchell Trubisky, and a bunch of other guys. We don't know who will play. What do you think?
Yeah, Mitchell Trubisky will be a starter day one for sure. This team does have to play a second place schedule, even though they just finished, 9-7-1. It was good enough for second place, which means they got to play. There's 3 swing games, the 2 in the AFC and that extra 17th game for the NFC is Vegas at home and at Indy and at Philadelphia.
Yep.
To me, those are 3 games they will probably lose. They're games that I think they can win: Carolina, Atlanta, Jets, and New Orleans.
Correct. Yep.
I think they can win those games. I don't see this team splitting in the division. Like you said, everyone's going to go 3-3. I think Pittsburgh's the one team that'll probably go 2-4 in their division.
All right.
So I only got them winning 2 games in the division. And then I just gave you Carolina, Atlanta, Jets, and New Orleans. And I think they'll drop one of those. They'll figure out a way to lose one of those games. So I only got this team winning 5 football games this year. 5-12.
By the way, New Orleans is at home, I think, right? At Pittsburgh?
It is, I believe, yeah.
But, I mean, New Orleans is not a slouch, so I'm not going to – that's not a gimme. To me, that's a toss-up game at the end of the day. I think New Orleans is going to be better than people think. But I'm with you. And, by the way, Philly, Tampa Bay, Buffalo, Vegas, and Miami are all on the road. Those are all losses, right?
I know. That's why I got them at 5-12. Right?
But believe it or not, I see them going as high as 8-9, I think. I don't know. I'll go 5-12. Mike Tomlin's a better coach than that. I think at the end of the day, Mike Tomlin gets them to 8-9. I'm going to stay with 8-9.
Okay.
All right. Let's go into a little fantasy real quick before we wrap up. You got a little fantasy thought for us. Talk about the fantasy thought you had this week. Fantasy in 5, fans. Here we go.
Fantasy in 5. Yeah. This week we're talking about wide receivers that are rookies. So
rookie wide receivers. All right.
Yep. So for those of you who understand fantasy fully, there's dynasty leagues where rookies are very, very valuable because you don't even draft outside of that. You have your team is your team every year, and you draft rookies, real rookies, to add to your team, and manage your roster accordingly. In a redraft league, you start fresh every year and you pick a new team. So rookies become more of a risk because they've never played a snap in the NFL, whereas in a dynasty league, you have a chance for them to grow and develop. You don't have that chance in a redraft league.
Right.
So we look at the receivers that came out of the draft this year and how they fit in and where are they going in your fantasy leagues right now. We'll start with Drake London. He's probably going to be the clear best receiver rookie that you could draft and even potentially start with for your team in the first week. He is the wide receiver 39 going off the board right now. So basically, if you're in a 12-team league, he would really not even make it to your third receiver, which would technically put him on the bench at wide receiver 39. But
really,
yeah, but he could get, because if you start 3, usually start 3 wide receivers or 2 and a flex, which could be another wide receiver, right? So that the most wide receivers usually you can start is 3. So in a 12-team league, that takes you to wide receiver 36. Anything beyond that becomes a guy that's going to be on your bench. He's going to play in bye weeks if someone gets injured, that kind of thing. But right now, that's the draft this year. It's not like last year. You had Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle, who you draft them in a redraft league. You're going to start them week 1, more than likely. This year, you're probably not even going to start any rookie wide receiver that you draft unless you don't draft well at that position and Drake London happens to be a number 3 guy on your team, which is possible as the wide receiver 39. He's going number 95 right now overall. on a consensus, which puts him in the 12 times 8 is 9. So it's the end of the 8th round in redraft leagues is where
But
he's
PB,
going.
let me ask you, where did he go? What team did he get drafted
Oh,
by?
I'm sorry. He went to Atlanta. He was I think he was number 10 overall and number 8 or something like that.
So he went. That's what I want to tell you. He went to Atlanta, who has really no quarterback. I mean, I don't see him even being a factor. There's some other guys, including the kid that went to Green Bay, being much more of a factor.
Yeah, that's a good point, but here's why he's not. Drake London, he just comes in with that size and athleticism. He's coming out of USC. But here's the thing. Drake London's the number 1 guy. He is the wide receiver 1 on the depth chart right now for Atlanta. So regardless, and fantasy is all about target share. It's all about targets. How many balls are going to get thrown to Drake London this year compared to getting thrown to a Christian Watson or some of these other guys I'm going to mention? That's really what it boils down to.
Well, give me some of the other ones, because I don't think Drake London's going to see many balls within a 5-yard radius of him.
Traylon Burks, he is the next wide receiver going off boards in drafts right now. He's the wide receiver 46. So here's a guy that basically your first wide receiver still on your bench, right? Because it will be your 4th guy in a 12-team league. 108 overall is where he's fallen in drafts. He's the number 2 on the depth chart right now in Tennessee. So his camp started slow. He's getting a little bit better now, but here's a guy that could see some targets. But again, he's in a run-first offense. So just like Atlanta's in a team that we don't know how they're going to really come out and play. They could be one of the worst teams in the league this year. Tennessee is a run-first team. So where's that going to leave him?
Well, I would say this, though. Here's my thing. Traylon Burks is going to be in an offense where when they don't run or they run play action, which is going to set him up even more, he's going to be wide open, a la A.J. Brown, who just left there. I think he's going to replace A.J. Brown perfect. The only problem about him is his health, right? We already know he's got some issues with his health, right?
Yeah.
But otherwise, if he's healthy, he's the number 1 in my mind.
Yeah. He's asthmatic too, which is, a chronic.
That's his health. That's his health problem.
Yeah. Next on the list, you have at wide receiver 51. So here's a guy that now you're talking about 123 overall. So that he's a 12th. You're looking at it like 10th round, 11th round type guy, is Chris Olave. He's going to be the wide receiver 3 in New Orleans behind Landry and Michael Thomas. So he has to fight for targets with those guys. But that's another guy out of Ohio State that you probably could roster on your team through a redraft type league and feel confident that he will help your team in weeks when you have buys and in weeks when some of your other players might be injured and not playing.
I want to say this about Chris Olave. He's considered the best hands guy coming out of college in the last 4 years. And I know what you said about Thomas and the other receiver.
Landry.
Thomas is injury prone. He's been injury prone for 2+ years. I would not be surprised if Jameis Winston latches on to Olave as a clutch guy because he catches everything.
There's a greater chance of that happening. I agree with you. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The next guy is Sky Moore. He's 4th on the depth chart, though. He's 4th on the depth chart right now behind Juju and MVS and Hardman. So he, again, is going to have to prove himself and emerge as a wide receiver. Look at the history of the passing game. Who does Mahomes?
By the way, we're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs.
We're talking about the Chiefs, yeah. Mahomes throws to Kelsey. He throws to Hill, through to Hill, and he throws to his backs. He never uses his wide receiver too. He hardly uses McCole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson and these guys. They didn't get a lot of targets. So now you got to jump MVS, right, to get to that wide receiver 2, potentially. I mean, I don't know.
Here's my argument. MVS is new to the team, and so is Juju. By the way, I love Juju Schuster, but he's got a little mileage on him. MVS, decent player, but they're both new to the system. So at the end of the day, if Sky Moore can pick up the system faster than those other guys, he's much more athletic than both of them, which is what Tyreek Hill was, an athletic receiver. These other 2 guys are good receivers, great receivers in the case of Juju, but they're not athletic guys like this kid. I don't know. Patrick Mahomes may gravitate towards the guy that has the speed and all the skill, versus the guys that are like solid.
Right. And he's going off as wide receiver 57 right now. So that puts him like right at the end of that fifth receiver on your team. Typically in leagues, you draft 5 receivers or 6 receivers. So again, he's a deeper bench guy, but certainly someone worth drafting in your redraft leagues.
Oh, for sure.
And then after that, you have this basically 3 more guys that come to mind. Jahan Dotson, who's with the Commanders. You have Jameson Williams out of Bama, who went to Detroit. And you have Christian Watson, who is out of North Dakota State, going to Green Bay. All those guys are going later in the 60s, basically. So here's a guy that would end up being your maybe 5th or 6th receiver, but more likely a 6th receiver on your team. They just have to hope emerges and gets an opportunity to play. I'm not touching anybody on the Commanders. I'm not sure Jameson Williams.
Of course not. They have your favorite quarterback, Carson Wentz, throwing the ball.
Right, exactly. And my second favorite quarterback in Detroit, Jared Goff, throwing the ball to Jameson Williams. So, I mean, that's just a rough. Christian Watson, I could see. He is the wide receiver 2, at least. Dotson and Williams right now are the wide receiver 3. If you're a wide receiver 3 on Detroit and you're the wide receiver 3 on the Commanders, I'm not touching you, right? But Watson is a wide receiver 2 on Green Bay, even though I think a lot of the targets are going to go to, Lazard. They'll use the tight ends, they'll use the backs, but but that's it for rookies. I mean, Drake London, Traylon Burks, and Chris Olave are definitely worth rostering in a redraft league. Sky Moore and beyond is a little shaky to me. It just really depends on how well you draft before that and what your needs are.
So here's what I'll say, based on what you just said, your breakdown. Sky Moore and Christian Watson, their preseason will dictate how you pick them in the draft this year, fantasy draft.
Right. And if you're looking for people to draft that have good quarterbacks, those are your guys, because you got Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. So
that's my point. If they just show up in preseason and have a chemistry with those 2 quarterbacks, when you're playing for the 1 and 2 best quarterbacks in the NFL, if you can catch the goddamn ball, you're okay, right?
Yeah. As long as you get your targets, you got to get your targets and get your opportunities. Get red zone, and then more specifically, red zone targets, right? That's the other thing you got to think about when it comes down to red zone play. Is Mahomes going to go to veteran NFL guys who he knows, or is he going to try to throw to the rookie?
Well, I'll just add Sky Moore and Christian Watson have breakaway speed, so they could, like Tyreek Hill, you could throw it to them on the opposite 30 and get a touchdown out of it.
That's true too.
Right. All right. Nice breakdown on the wide receivers. That's it. So next week, fans, we're going to help the rookie fans out with fantasy. We're going to give you a little breakdown how you should draft if this is your first fantasy year ever. Right, PB?
Yep. We'll help. We'll be Fantasy 101.
All right. Fantasy 101. I like it. All right, PB. Nice job. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.